November 6, 1943, somewhere above the English Channel. A cold wind slices through the fuselage of a stripped-down B-24 bomber deep in the night. Radio static spills from racks of tangled wire and gleaming instrumentation. The sky trembles with distant thunder as a crew works by the glow of red bulbs, eyes flicking between scopes and dials. Above, Navigator Lieutenant Tom Reynolds squints at a flickering screen. His fingers dance nervously over switches as he searches for a pattern among the chaos. Rain spatters the cockpit windows, and the smell of hot circuitry fills the air. Shadows leap each time the pilot tilts the plane, haunted by the knowledge that hundreds of miles away, radar operators in German bunkers are trying to guide batteries toward them. Below decks, technician Harry Grant slides in a new device. Designed just hours ago, little more than a box overflowing with wires and mystery. Its only description, Mark III jammer, prototype. Outside, the darkness threatens. Within, a hope flickers. What none of them knows, in the next 40 minutes, an invisible war will unfold across frequencies, and the fate of entire bomber formations will hinge on a handful of engineers, their stubborn innovations, and their willingness to gamble lives against the impossible. And on this night, Reynolds would later whisper, we fought with wavelengths instead of bullets. The problem, scale of crisis, spring of 1943. Allied bomber losses are catastrophic. Over 30,000 airmen have already vanished into smoky skies or shattered fields from Hamburg to Schweinfurt. Synapses of Nazi air defense, radar, flak, interceptors, operate with machine-like precision, tearing through lumbering Allied fleets. Numbers are merciless. More than 1 in 5 bombers fail to return from deep strikes. The normal solutions, heavier armor, more guns, tighter formations, yield diminishing returns. Each innovation answered in kind by faster German radars, smarter controllers, relentless night fighters, and even as dozens of nations pour millions into research, bureaucracy stifles change. It is said radar is fixed, air power is brute force, and engineers are expendable. Doctrine ossifies. Generals cite tradition, not data, while men fall through clouds in burning machines. London, Washington, Berlin, meeting rooms echo the same verdict. We must accept losses for victory. But behind the scenes, engineers in woolen coats murmur, there must be another way. The innovator, the maverick who refused, step into the shoes of Frederick Terman, Stanford engineer and son of a former university president. Tall, reserved, haunted by the funeral of a bomber pilot he'd once taught radio skills to. Terman's obsession is not invention, but the safe return of men willing to risk everything. He is joined by a chaotic brotherhood, British those of the Telecommunications Research Establishment in Malvern, Americans from Bell Labs, anonymous RF and USAAF engineers who will never set foot in a cockpit, but see each sortie as a bet paid in blood. Cramped labs, flickering with fluorescent light, late-night arguments. The enemy's eyes are electric, so why can't the darkness be too? Some are misfits, some geniuses, some just tired of reading yet another casualty telegram for someone who should have made it home. From Malvern to MIT, from foggy training fields to the hidden basements beneath Whitehall, they gather around the single question, can an idea beat death? Every new funeral, every missing airman is the cost of waiting, Terman writes. The idea, revelation by wire. In the summer of 1942, Terman sketches a diagram on a napkin in a San Francisco cafe. Beside him, a young technician doodles noise waves, lines folding, twisting, overlapping, until one crashes through a schematic marked German Early Warning Radar Würzburg. The breakthrough comes not from a grand plan, but a mistake. A transmitter left on the wrong frequency blinds a radar set in the lab. Instead of panic, Terman asks, what if confusion, not just concealment, could be the weapon? Thus the simplest of weapons, the jammer. A box, handfuls of copper, simple logic, not meant to kill, but to overwhelm. Over the next months, ever cruder, ever cleverer Mark IIIs are built. Strips of tinfoil are thrown from bombers, window chaff, radios scream static, rugged shamrock. Each invention less a brilliance, more a refusal to quit. We built confusion out of wire and pride, a British engineer recalls. And when it worked, only the men in the planes understood why. The rejection, resistance, and ridicule. Not all are believers. High command scoffs at the jammers, calling them illegal, amateur nonsense, and a fool's errand. One U.S. general declares, No machine will ever outthink a gunner. Another, you are gambling science on fairy dust. Bureaucracy looms. Testing is delayed. Budget slashed. Terman risks his reputation. One more failure and you're out. Many engineers simply hide their work. Sneak prototypes aboard under cover of night. British Air Ministry minutes record. Experimental apparatus not to be installed in operational aircraft without direct authorization. But the stakes are named. Every rejected device, another squadron lost. Dialogue from heated meetings. We don't fight wars with radios. Tell that to the men buried last week. This borders on sabotage. No, sir, it's innovation. The first test. A night over Bremen, March 1943. RAF squadron equipped with prototype jammers, part of Operation Gomorrah. In flight, skepticism chokes the cockpit. Wires hum. Pilots expect little. Attack commences. German radar screens flicker. Controllers curse as signals melt into noise. Flak batteries lose precision. For the first time, bomber casualties drop sharply. Test data. Radar misses up by 30%. Success percentage of formation survival climbs. Upon landing, a navigator declares, "It didn't feel safer. It felt quieter. The silence saved us." Engineers gather in cramped hangars with mugs of cold tea, listening to flight crews describe disbelief and relief. Never before has an invisible box saved so many lives. Night over Bremen, March 1943. Wind keens across the fuselage as Harry Grant watches a row of trembling needles on the Mark III box, the device alive in his hands, ready for its first true test. The radio operator's voice wavers, clipped and tense. Begin transmission. Activate jamming sequence. Static surges. For a few fragile seconds, nothing seems to happen. Then the flak bursts begin to scatter off target, their deadly rhythm interrupted. Somewhere on the ground, German radar operators curse as sweeping arcs of reflected energy dissolve into chaos. The once predictable skies are now wild, noisy, unpredictable. The British bomber formation weaves, laboring against the anti-aircraft guns, but tonight, confusion is their shield. Out of 120 bombers, more than 90 return. Downstairs, in a dimly lit lab at Malvern, an engineer named Joan Curran sketches out another, impossible solution. Aluminum strips cut precisely to half the wavelength of enemy radar, released by the handful. The air fills with glittering deception window. "They laughed at me," she later said, until the echoes vanished from their screens. In Washington, the jamming experiments escalate. American engineers take apart captured German radar sets, probing them for weaknesses. Operation Biting returns a trove of secrets. The Würzburg system's frequency, its modulation, its blind spots. This intelligence is funneled directly into the design of Carpet, an array of noise generators fitted to bombers. "Every flight became a laboratory," says a pilot. "We never had enough data. We just had hope." The turning point, July 1943. Hamburg, Operation Gomorrah. Thousands of strips of window fall like confetti over the city. German operators watch in horror as their screens fill with blinding false echoes. Orders crackle, frantic, "Ignore those targets. None can be real." But in the cacophony, the real bombers slip undetected through the storm. That night, RAF losses plummet, the city burns, but the skies become a sanctuary. Testimony from ground observers: the radar was possessed. No detection, no control. We were blind. Bomber crews return changed, stunned by the quiet. Months pass. For the first time, jamming systems are mounted on every major Allied raid. Reports flow in from 8th Air Force. Mark II jammed Würzburg completely. Carpet tuned mid-flight. Formation survival rates are up. Word spreads, not in headlines, but in letters home. Tonight the box sang static and the guns faded. Slowly doubters fall silent. Risks once mocked now become regulation. Those engineers, they saved more men than any armor ever could, an American squadron leader writes. Human details, the engineer's journey. Frederick Terman returns to his lab after another funeral. This time, the loss seems personal. The face in the black and white photo is one he knew. Failing that young pilot, Terman doubles down, risking career and pride as he pushes new generations of electronic countermeasures. Joan Curran faces skepticism and dismissal but persists. Her job, declared amateurish, becomes critical for thousands. One night, after a massive raid on Berlin, crews gather in silence at briefing. "The enemy was blind," someone whispers. "You did that." Curran blushes, unacknowledged. Laboratories echo with stress. Engineers subsist on tea and adrenaline, pushed by military deadlines and the real tally of lives. Failures hurt, but progress makes absence felt most acutely. Where are the ones who would have died? It was just wires and noise, but it let us live another night. Flight Lieutenant James Day. The revolution is complete when it becomes invisible. Frederick Terman. They never sought fame, only fewer funerals, or AF after action report. The skies over Europe, summer of 1943. Allied planes fly higher, heavier, armed with the latest inventions of desperation. In their bellies, window, metallic strips fluttering into the night, clouds of confusion stretching for miles. In their noses, jamming boxes like carpet and Mandrel hum quietly. The war is no longer just fought in steel and fire, but in waves and echoes, a silent duel carried across continents. On the ground, German radar crews wrestle with chaos. Würzburg's screens display bursts of phantom aircraft, signals leap and vanish, bearings slip. Anti-aircraft gunners search for patterns to no avail. Every innovation answers a new threat. The endless loop of invention and counter-invention spins onward. Joan Curran's window is declared the savior of bomber fleets. Finally tested over Hamburg, its effect is dramatic. German defenses, once deadly, are blinded by their own technology, the ground batteries firing blindly while the real enemy slips away. Curran is quietly thanked, but never steps into the sunlight of public acclaim. In Cambridge and Malvern, engineers alter frequencies, tune transmitters, monitor static. Every raid is an experiment, writes a technician. Every return is another chance to try again. Mandrel screens the bomber formations, jamming the German Freya radar. Dina attacks the ground control transmissions, splintering communications between radars and fighter pilots. Leading planes dispense window, cloaking the armada behind them. Carpet jams gun-laying radars, forcing German crews to recalibrate with every passing minute. The challenge is endless. With every success, German engineers fight back, altering frequencies, boosting transmitter power, devising new filters. Yet the tide is turned. The Allies no longer fear their own shadows. In a U.S. 8th Air Force briefing room, survivors gather after a raid on Berlin. A colonel stands, voice trembling. This night, the static was our shield. You've done more than build machines. You've given us a chance. Technological drama, advances and experiments, spring 1944. Laboratories buzz with tension. The MIT Radiation Laboratory shifts focus to new waves, centimetric and microwave radars. The SCR-584 gunfire control radar emerges, a system so precise it can direct anti-aircraft fire automatically, even in blinding weather. Engineers marvel at the sensitivity, while operators trust the machine to defend ground and sky. The British operate OBO, a ground-controlled blind bombing system. Its narrow beams guide planes to their targets in pitch darkness. At Malvern, the early airborne interception radar, known as H2S, gives navigators a glowing map in the cockpit. Land, sea, and city, all visible through the storm. Jammers evolve in parallel. Barrage systems bathe wide bands in white noise. Spot jammers hunt for enemy pulses, locking on for moments of terror. Fighters home in using Serret, tracking German aircraft by their own radar transmissions. The Allies' invisible arsenal grows, overwhelming the German defense's ability to adapt. Every experiment pushes new boundaries. Engineers spend nights waiting for test flights, sitting in silence, listening for the sound of returning engines. Testing follows the cycle: transmit, evade, adjust, and document every result. Hard statistics fill blackboards. Casualty rates drop 40% after introduction of window and carpet. Bomber survival jumps to 2 out of 3 on missions previously considered suicidal. Noise, confusion, deception. These became our strongest weapons, says a surviving technician. Human reactions, testimony, and impact. In Hamburg, an unnamed German radar operator records a diary entry. Tonight, nothing worked. The English have stolen our vision. Weeks later, his post is overrun. British pilots press trembling hands against jamming consoles, grateful for each silent run through enemy airspace. Crews send letters home. We owe our lives to the engineers we'll never meet. Frederick Terman reads the casualty numbers with tears. Curran, watching from afar, hears the praise for salvation, but not for invention. The quiet revolution continues, unheralded. The war nears its climax as engineers and aviators face new and shifting fronts. Radar innovations race forward. British Mandrel and moonshine jammers deploy in waves, flooding enemy detection screens with noise and false echoes. The Americans refine carpet and jostle, filling the ether with chaos that makes the skies momentarily ungovernable. German countermeasures emerge, smarter filters, frequency hopping, frantic redesigns. But every new defense is met with a rapid Allied response. The war in the air becomes a battle of ghost signals, trickery, and electric courage. Night missions grow almost surreal. Bombers crisscross over Germany, wrapped in bubbles of static and deception, every aircraft both weapon and experiment. Jamming technology diversifies. Bromide, Domino, and Mekon spoof German navigation systems. Drumsticks and tuba jam ground transmissions and Morse code. Ingenious tricks, like triggering IFF devices in enemy fighters, let British night hunters stalk their targets. Even the humble electric razor becomes a tool of war. Sailors aboard Royal Navy ships weaponize their razor's stray circuit noise to jam the radio guidance of German anti-ship missiles. The faces behind these feats remain blurred by secrecy. Lieutenant Field improvises jammers from radio parts, chasing signals across Mediterranean battlegrounds. David Sylvester, working from the British Isles, develops broadband receivers and frequency-agile jammers to defend fleets and convoys. The cost is measured in sleepless nights, failed prototypes, and relentless testing. For every device that works, many more fail in silence. Operation Overlord, June 1944. Allied armadas launch for Normandy under an umbrella of electronic countermeasures. Jammers blanket German coastal radar. Mekon beacons draw enemy fighters away from the real landing zones, buying precious minutes and saving hundreds of men at the beach. Post-mission briefings are filled with awe. We saw nothing on the radar. They outthought us, German officers admit. Hard statistics mark the impact. By late 1944, the survival rate for Allied bombers on deep missions climbs above 60%, a reversal from the darkest days of night raids. Losses, though still tragic, are now measured in single digits, not decimated squadrons. In every pilot's mind, the thanks go unspoken, directed to those 100-odd men and women cloistered in labs from Boston to Cambridge, from Black Prince in Norway to ships in the Med. Their tools are invisible, but the fate of thousands rides on every beam, burst, and ghostly echo. Human drama and global spread. As victory nears, Churchill addresses Parliament. Let us remember the ones whose skill gave us the sky. The work of quiet hands and brilliant minds has saved more than we can count. Across the world, governments take notice. The Soviet Union rushes to copy captured devices, while U.S. Signal Corps push the boundaries into the Pacific, jamming Japanese radar sets and landing beacons. Every major air force in the world now trains a cadre in electronic warfare. Manuals are rewritten, doctrine is shattered and rebuilt. Peace will come, but the revolution in defense, once dismissed as amateur or impossible, has become ordinary, essential. Frederick Terman retires into obscurity, a teacher once more. His legacy is visible only to those who know what vanished threat has made their job survivable. Joan Curran moves on to other sciences, never receiving the fame that window, her brainstorm, delivered to so many who lived. Lieutenant Field and David Sylvester fade into the archive, leaving boxfuls of strange radios and cryptic notes. Quotation, reflection. We outwitted them with static. That was our victory, U.S. Signal Corps engineer. The shields we built were made of noise and hope, British technician. Every carrier in the world still carries their idea, and their refusal to accept needless death, post-war historians' reflection. The fighting ends, but the invisible war continues. After 1945, the men and women who electrified World War II scatter into new fields. Some stay in military labs, pivoting to ever more complex signals. Others return to civilian life, their war stories hidden behind classified files and dusty accolades. But the jammers, the windows, the countermeasures don't disappear. The world rushes to catch up. Soviet scientists study Allied wrecks, hammering out a new generation of electronic shields. American engineers found the Radio Research Laboratory, splitting into teams that develop wiretapping and signals intelligence for the world's superpowers. Europe rebuilds its airports, rail yards, telecommunications lines, using technology born in the chaos of war. The cycle of innovation and counter-innovation resumes, now in peacetime. Civilian radar for weather, navigation, and air traffic. Radio astronomy hunting echoes across space. Jamming tactics mature. The Cold War turns radar deception and electronic interference into state secrets. Early missile guidance systems proved vulnerable to the same clever static that saved bomber crews. Electronic warfare becomes a discipline, a shadow trade, unglamorous but essential. The struggle between signal and silence defines the next 50 years. In Korea, Vietnam, and the Gulf, radar and radio jammers ride into battle. New generations of engineers, many inspired by the invisible revolutionaries of the past, trained to manipulate the electromagnetic spectrum, rivaling the breakthroughs of WWII. Quote from Mercury Labs historian, "Electronic warfare demands persistence. The cycle never ends." More battles follow, over skies, seas, cyberspace. The Israeli Air Force disables enemy radars during Operation Orchard. Russian machines like Borisogledsk II blanket entire front lines in electronic fog. Drones fall, missiles miss, commandos slip unseen. Quiet hands still shape the battlefield. Civilian life, too, is transformed. Storm warnings, GPS navigation, and Wi-Fi all carry echoes of wartime innovation. The invisible shield that saved men over Bremen now guides flights over continents, protects ships against pirates, even secures digital privacy. A former RAF operator, now a father, watches his children fly in safety. We trusted wires and noise. Today, everyone trusts the quiet. The revolution becomes invisible. The bravest ideas, once rejected, mocked, and hidden, are now universal. Every airliner on Earth uses radar born of that hard-won science. Every major navy shields its ships with countermeasures first tested in terror. Humble inventions like window and mandrel become so ordinary they vanish into the background of daily life. Joan Curran, older now, reflects, "If they never know what saved them, the victory is complete." Hard numbers crystallize the impact. By 1950, peacetime accident rates in aviation fall tenfold compared to wartime. By 1960, electronic warfare doctrine is taught at every major military academy. Civilian deaths from air traffic collision drop to historic lows, and weather forecasting becomes a science rather than a guess. The engineers fade into history. Their legacies survive in codebooks, manuals, and the safety of millions. Final reflections, humanity and humility. The historian's voice closes the chapter. In every era, silent wars rage beyond the headlines. The engineers who electrified World War II never sought banners or medals. They won peace not with destruction, but with the creation of safety. A legacy invisible, but indelible. A subtle call to reflection for the viewer. So next time you step onto an airplane, tune a radio, or watch the forecast, remember, the best inventions come from refusing the needless loss. Remember the forgotten hands who built shields from static so others could live.